The scorching Afghan sun beat down mercilessly on Forward Operating Base Chapman as Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez adjusted her scope for what felt like the 100th time that week. The base, situated in the volatile Khost province, had become a crucible of frustration for the Marine sniper unit stationed there. For 3 months, they had been tasked with providing overwatch and eliminating high-value targets in the region, but their success rate had plummeted to an embarrassing 0. Rodriguez wiped the sweat from her brow as she reviewed the latest intelligence reports. The Taliban had grown bolder in recent weeks, launching coordinated attacks on convoy routes and establishing new strongholds in the surrounding mountains. What made the situation more maddening was that the enemy seemed to know exactly when and where the Marine snipers would be positioned. Every carefully planned operation ended in failure, with targets mysteriously vanishing moments before the shot could be taken. The morning briefing had been particularly tense. Colonel James Mitchell, the base commander, had made it clear that patience was running thin back at headquarters. The 2nd Battalion, 3rd Marines had built a reputation for precision and effectiveness, but recent mission reports painted a picture of incompetence that threatened to overshadow years of distinguished service. Sergeant First Class Danny Thompson, the unit's most experienced marksman, had been visibly shaken after missing what should have been an easy 400-meter shot just 2 days prior. The target, a known bomb-maker responsible for several IED attacks on American patrols, had been standing in an open courtyard for nearly 10 minutes. Thompson had taken his time, controlled his breathing, and squeezed the trigger with the same technique that had earned him over 50 confirmed kills in previous deployments. The bullet had somehow sailed wide, striking a mud wall 3 feet to the left of the target. The psychological impact on the team was becoming evident. Corporal Mike Stevens, typically the most confident member of the unit, had begun second-guessing every calculation and environmental factor. The mountain winds, which they had successfully compensated for countless times before, now seemed unpredictable and hostile. Equipment that had functioned flawlessly for years was being questioned and rechecked obsessively. Rodriguez remembered the conversation she had overheard between Thompson and Stevens the previous evening. They had been discussing the possibility that their rifles had been tampered with, though both knew that the weapons were secured in a locked armory and checked regularly by the unit's gunsmith. The alternative explanations were even more troubling. Either they were losing their skills as marksmen, or something supernatural was protecting their targets. The intelligence officer, Captain Sarah Hayes, had presented a different theory during the morning briefing. She believed that the Taliban had developed a sophisticated early warning system, possibly involving spotters positioned at multiple observation points around the base. This would explain why targets seemed to disappear just as the snipers were preparing to engage. However, extensive reconnaissance missions had failed to identify any such network. As Rodriguez prepared for another mission that afternoon, she reflected on her own journey to this point. She had joined the Marines 8 years earlier, driven by a desire to serve her country and prove that women could excel in combat roles. Sniper school had been grueling, with only 12% of candidates successfully completing the program. Rodriguez had not only graduated but had done so at the top of her class, earning the respect of instructors who had initially doubted her capabilities. Her first deployment to Iraq had been a baptism by fire. The urban environment of Fallujah presented unique challenges for snipers, with limited sight lines and civilian populations that could mask enemy movement. Rodriguez had adapted quickly, developing innovative techniques for urban warfare that were later incorporated into Marine Corps training manuals. Her confirmed kill count of 37 had placed her among the top performers in her unit. But Afghanistan was different. The mountainous terrain and tribal dynamics created a complex battlefield where traditional sniper tactics often proved inadequate. The enemy was patient, well-equipped, and intimately familiar with the geography. They used the landscape to their advantage, appearing and disappearing like ghosts among the rocky outcroppings and narrow valleys. The base itself reflected the challenging nature of the deployment. Originally built by Soviet forces during their occupation of Afghanistan, Forward Operating Base Chapman bore the scars of decades of conflict. American engineers had reinforced the structures and added modern communications equipment, but the fundamental layout remained unchanged. This created security vulnerabilities that the Taliban had learned to exploit. Rodriguez's team consisted of 4 other Marines, each bringing unique skills and perspectives to their missions. Besides Thompson and Stevens, there was Lance Corporal Kevin Park, a Korean American from Los Angeles whose mathematical mind made him exceptional at calculating complex ballistics problems. The final member was Corporal Jessica Wright, a former competitive shooter from Montana who could consistently hit targets at ranges that challenged even the most experienced snipers. The team had worked together for over 2 years, developing the kind of intuitive coordination that distinguished elite units from average ones. They could communicate through subtle gestures and anticipate each other's actions without verbal commands. This chemistry had been crucial to their previous successes, but it had also made their recent failures more demoralizing. The failed missions had followed a disturbingly similar pattern. Intelligence would identify a high-value target in a specific location, usually a compound or meeting place used by Taliban leadership. The team would establish an observation post at dawn, spending hours confirming the target's identity and waiting for an optimal shot opportunity. Just as the sniper was ready to engage, something would go wrong. Sometimes the target would receive a phone call and abruptly leave the area. Other times, vehicles would arrive unexpectedly, creating chaos that made a clean shot impossible. On 3 separate occasions, sudden weather changes had obscured visibility at the crucial moment. The combination of bad luck and apparent intelligence leaks had created a perfect storm of failure. The psychological pressure was compounded by the knowledge that their failures had real consequences. Each missed opportunity allowed dangerous individuals to continue planning attacks against American forces and Afghan civilians. The bombmaker who had escaped Thompson's shot had successfully carried out 2 more IED attacks in the following week, killing 3 Afghan National Army soldiers and wounding 7 others. Rodriguez understood that military operations involved inherent risks and that not every mission would succeed. However, the complete absence of success was unprecedented in her experience. Even during the most challenging periods of her previous deployments, there had been victories to balance the setbacks. The current situation felt different, as if the very foundations of their expertise had been undermined. The equipment failures added another layer of complexity to their predicament. 2 rifles had experienced scope malfunctions during critical moments, causing significant point-of-impact shifts that resulted in clean misses. The unit's primary Barrett M82 had suffered a trigger assembly failure that prevented Thompson from taking a shot at a Taliban commander who had been exposed for nearly 15 minutes. Technical investigations had failed to identify any systemic problems with their equipment. The weapons were maintained according to strict protocols, with regular inspections and preventive maintenance performed by qualified personnel. Ammunition was stored in climate-controlled conditions and tested regularly for consistency. Environmental factors were monitored and compensated for using proven techniques. The base's location in Khost province placed it at the center of one of Afghanistan's most active conflict zones. The province bordered Pakistan's tribal regions, creating a porous frontier that Taliban and other militant groups used for smuggling weapons and personnel. This geographic reality meant that enemy forces enjoyed significant logistical advantages and could retreat across the border when pursued by coalition forces. Local tribal dynamics further complicated the operational environment. The Pashtun tribes that dominated the region had complex relationships with various militant groups, sometimes cooperating with them, and other times opposing their presence. These shifting alliances made it difficult for American forces to identify reliable local partners and gather accurate intelligence about enemy activities. Rodriguez had spent considerable time studying the cultural and historical context of their deployment. She understood that the current conflict was just the latest chapter in Afghanistan's long history of resisting foreign occupation. The Soviet invasion of the 1980s had left deep scars on the collective memory of the Afghan people, and many viewed American forces with suspicion despite their stated mission of supporting the Afghan government. The team's living conditions at Forward Operating Base Chapman reflected the austere nature of their deployment. Accommodations were basic, with each Marine allocated a small sleeping area and fortified barracks designed to withstand rocket and mortar attacks. The dining facilities served adequate but uninspiring meals, and recreational facilities were limited to a small gym and a communications tent where personnel could video call family members back home. Despite these hardships, morale had remained relatively high until the string of mission failures began. The Marines took pride in their professional abilities and found satisfaction in contributing to the broader mission of stabilizing Afghanistan. The recent setbacks had challenged their sense of purpose and raised questions about their effectiveness as a fighting unit. The base's medical facility had reported an increase in stress-related symptoms among the sniper team members. Sleep disturbances, appetite changes, and difficulty concentrating were becoming common complaints. The unit's chaplain had conducted several informal counseling sessions, helping the Marines process their frustrations and maintain their mental health. Rodriguez had always been skeptical of supernatural explanations for military phenomena, preferring to focus on tactical and technical factors that could be measured and addressed. However, the pattern of failures had begun to challenge her rational worldview. The timing and nature of the setbacks seemed too consistent to be explained by coincidence alone. Local Afghan interpreters and support staff had begun whispering about a curse on the American snipers. According to their beliefs, the spirits of warriors killed in previous conflicts sometimes protected certain locations from foreign invaders. While Rodriguez dismissed such notions as superstition, she couldn't deny that the stories were having an impact on morale throughout the base. The intelligence picture was further complicated by the presence of multiple insurgent groups operating in the area. In addition to the Taliban, there were elements of the Haqqani network, foreign fighters from Pakistan and other countries, and various criminal organizations involved in drug trafficking and weapons smuggling. Each group had different operational patterns and security procedures, making it difficult to develop effective countermeasures. As the afternoon mission approached, Rodriguez felt the familiar mixture of anticipation and anxiety that preceded every operation. The target was another high-value individual, described in the intelligence brief as a Taliban commander responsible for coordinating attacks throughout the province. His compound was located in a valley approximately 2 kilometers from the base, within easy range of their weapon systems. The mission plan called for the team to establish an observation post on a ridge overlooking the target area before dawn. They would spend the day monitoring activity at the compound, waiting for the commander to expose himself for a clear shot. Intelligence indicated that he typically emerged for afternoon prayers, providing a predictable opportunity for engagement. Rodriguez checked her equipment one final time, ensuring that every component was properly secured and functioning. Her rifle, a customized M40A5 sniper system, had been her constant companion throughout multiple deployments. The weapon had accounted for most of her confirmed kills and had never failed her when she needed it most. The familiar weight and balance of the rifle provided some comfort as she prepared for what she hoped would be a successful mission. The team gathered for their final briefing as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Colonel Mitchell attended the session personally, emphasizing the importance of breaking their streak of failures and restoring the unit's reputation. He assured them that they had the full support of the command structure and that additional resources would be made available if needed. As they prepared to depart the base, Rodriguez felt a sense of determination that had been missing from recent missions. She was tired of failure and ready to prove that her team still possessed the skills and dedication that had made them effective in previous deployments. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Afghan landscape, creating the kind of dramatic lighting that had become synonymous with her memories of this harsh but beautiful country. The patrol moved out through the base's main gate, beginning what Rodriguez hoped would be a successful mission that could restore their confidence and reputation. The weight of expectation was heavy on all their shoulders, but she sensed a renewed focus among her teammates that hadn't been present in recent weeks. Whether through skill, luck, or divine intervention, she was determined that this mission would end differently than the others. The rocky terrain outside the base was familiar territory that the team had traversed dozens of times during their deployment. They moved with practiced efficiency, using natural cover to mask their movement and minimize their exposure to potential enemy observation. The 2-kilometer journey to their observation post would take approximately 90 minutes, allowing them to reach their position well before the target's expected appearance. Rodriguez's mind wandered as they walked, thinking about the families back home who were counting on her and her teammates to complete their mission successfully and return safely. She thought about the Afghan civilians who suffered when Taliban commanders like their current target were allowed to continue their operations unchecked. Most of all, she thought about the professional pride that had driven her to excel in one of the military's most demanding specialties. The observation post was a natural formation of rocks that provided excellent concealment and clear sight lines to the target compound. The team had used this position several times before, and they moved into their assigned positions with minimal discussion. Rodriguez settled behind her rifle, adjusting the bipod legs to achieve a stable firing position, while Stevens confirmed their range and wind conditions. As the afternoon wore on, the compound below showed signs of normal activity. Women moved between buildings, children played in the courtyard, and men engaged in various tasks related to daily life in rural Afghanistan. The scene looked deceptively peaceful, providing no obvious indication that it harbored one of the region's most dangerous insurgent leaders. Rodriguez maintained her focus on the primary building where intelligence indicated the target was most likely to appear. Her crosshairs swept methodically across potential exit points, and she mentally rehearsed the sequence of actions she would need to execute when the opportunity presented itself. Despite the recent failures, her training and experience told her that success was simply a matter of patience and preparation. The call to prayer echoed across the valley as the sun reached its optimal angle for the shot. Rodriguez felt her pulse quicken slightly as she prepared for what she hoped would be the moment that ended their streak of bad luck and restored their reputation as the Marine Corps' finest marksmen. The compound remained eerily quiet as the call to prayer faded into the mountain air. Rodriguez maintained her position behind the rifle, her eye pressed against the scope as she methodically scanned the building entrances. The intelligence had been specific about the target's routine, but, like so many other details in this deployment, what should have been predictable was proving frustratingly elusive. Stevens lay beside her with the spotting scope, calling out minor wind changes and tracking the movement of individuals within the compound. His voice had developed a tension over the past weeks that reflected the pressure they all felt. Each mission carried the weight of their previous failures, and the psychological burden was becoming harder to ignore. The target compound consisted of 3 main buildings arranged around a central courtyard. The structures were typical of rural Afghan architecture, with thick mud walls designed to provide protection from both the elements and potential attackers. Intelligence had identified the largest building as the commander's primary residence, with the smaller structures housing his extended family and security personnel. Thompson and Park had positioned themselves 50 meters to the left, providing an alternate firing position and additional security for the team. Wright covered their 6 o'clock position, watching for any signs that their presence had been detected. The coordination between team members was seamless despite their recent struggles, a testament to the months of training and shared experience that bound them together. As the afternoon progressed, Rodriguez began to notice subtle details about the compound that hadn't appeared in the intelligence briefings. Solar panels on the roof of the main building suggested a level of technological sophistication that was unusual for the region. Multiple satellite dishes indicated communication capabilities that exceeded what most rural Afghan families would require. These observations reinforced her belief that they were indeed monitoring a high-value target. The first sign of unusual activity came approximately 2 hours into their observation period. A motorcycle approached the compound from the south, carrying a rider whose clothing and bearing suggested military or paramilitary training. The individual dismounted quickly and disappeared into the main building, remaining inside for exactly 15 minutes before emerging and departing via the same route. Stevens documented the visitor's appearance and timing in his logbook while Rodriguez maintained her focus on potential target areas. The precision of the visit's duration suggested a planned meeting rather than a social call, adding credibility to the intelligence assessment that the compound served as a command and control center for Taliban operations in the region. The psychological pressure of their mission was intensified by reports they had received about other Marine sniper teams operating in Afghanistan. Units deployed to Helmand and Kandahar provinces were reporting consistent success rates, with some teams achieving confirmed kills on a near-daily basis. These reports made their own failures seem even more inexplicable and professionally damaging. Rodriguez had begun to analyze their previous missions with obsessive detail, searching for common factors that might explain their lack of success. She had reviewed weather data, equipment maintenance records, and intelligence reports, but no clear pattern had emerged. The randomness of their failures was perhaps the most frustrating aspect of their situation. The team's weapons were among the finest available to American military forces. Rodriguez's M40A5 was equipped with an unertl 10 power scope that had been precisely zeroed for her shooting preferences. The rifle's accuracy had been verified on multiple occasions at the base's improvised firing range, consistently producing sub-minute of angle groups at extended ranges. The ammunition they used was match-grade .308 Winchester rounds manufactured specifically for precision shooting applications. Each cartridge was inspected before loading to ensure consistency in weight, dimensions, and powder charge. The ballistic characteristics of their ammunition had been carefully documented, providing the data necessary for accurate long-range shooting calculations. Environmental factors in Afghanistan's mountainous terrain created unique challenges for precision shooting, but these were problems that experienced snipers were trained to overcome. Altitude effects on bullet trajectory were predictable and could be compensated for through scope adjustments. Wind patterns in the valleys were complex, but manageable with proper observation and calculation. As the third hour of observation began, Rodriguez noticed increased activity within the compound. Additional vehicles had arrived, and more individuals were moving between buildings. The level of security consciousness displayed by the occupants was consistent with the behavior of high-value targets who were aware of the constant threat of surveillance and attack. The psychological impact of their mission failures extended beyond the immediate team to affect the broader Marine unit stationed at Forward Operating Base Chapman. Other personnel had begun to view the sniper team with a mixture of sympathy and skepticism, questioning whether the unit still possessed the capabilities that had once made them an elite asset. Rodriguez remembered a conversation with the base's communications officer, who had mentioned intercepted Taliban radio traffic discussing the cursed American shooters who could no longer hit their targets. The enemy's awareness of their failures was both embarrassing and operationally significant, as it might encourage more aggressive behavior from insurgent leadership. The compound's location in the valley provided natural protection from observation and attack, with steep ridgelines on three sides that limited the number of potential sniper positions. The Taliban commander who reportedly lived there had chosen his residence wisely, selecting a site that maximized his security while maintaining easy access to smuggling routes that connected Afghanistan with Pakistan's tribal regions. Local intelligence sources had provided conflicting information about the target's identity and background. Some reports described him as a former Afghan military officer who had joined the Taliban after becoming disillusioned with the post-invasion government. Other sources suggested he was a foreign fighter who had come to Afghanistan from Pakistan or other regional countries to participate in the insurgency. What all sources agreed on was the individual's operational importance to Taliban activities in Khost province. He was reportedly responsible for coordinating supply shipments, planning attacks on coalition forces, and recruiting new fighters from among the local population. His elimination would significantly disrupt insurgent operations in the region. The fourth hour of observation brought a significant development as a convoy of 3 vehicles approached the compound from the north. The lead vehicle was a pickup truck with a heavy machine gun mounted in the bed, followed by 2 SUVs with tinted windows that prevented observation of their occupants. The convoy's security posture and coordination suggested the arrival of high-ranking individuals. Stevens immediately began photographing the vehicles and their occupants while Rodriguez prepared for the possibility that their primary target might finally appear. The timing of the convoy's arrival coincided with intelligence predictions about a planned meeting of Taliban leadership, raising hopes that the mission might finally achieve success. The vehicles parked in the compound's courtyard in a defensive formation that provided overlapping fields of fire and quick egress routes. Armed guards emerged from the escort vehicles and established a security perimeter while the SUV passengers remained concealed. The professionalism displayed by the security team reinforced the assessment that this was indeed a high-value target package. Rodriguez adjusted her rifle's position slightly to improve her angle on the courtyard where any meeting was likely to take place. The range to the target area was 847 meters according to her laser rangefinder, well within the effective range of her weapon system. Wind conditions remained favorable, with only mild crosswinds that could be easily compensated for. The psychological preparation for taking a shot involved more than just technical considerations. Rodriguez had to mentally prepare for the possibility of ending another human being's life, a responsibility that she took seriously despite her professional training. Each confirmed kill carried moral weight that extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation. The rules of engagement for their mission were clearly defined and had been thoroughly briefed before deployment. The target had been positively identified as a combatant leader whose elimination was authorized under the applicable laws of armed conflict. Rodriguez understood that her actions were legally justified and militarily necessary, but this knowledge didn't eliminate the human dimension of her role. As the 5th hour of observation began, the compound's activity level reached its peak with numerous individuals moving between buildings and vehicles. Radio intercepts suggested that the planned meeting was about to commence, with participants gathering in the main building's central room. The convergence of multiple intelligence indicators created a sense of anticipation that their long wait might finally be rewarded. The team's communication discipline remained excellent despite the tension of the situation. Stevens continued to provide precise updates on environmental conditions and target movement while maintaining awareness of potential threats to their position. Thompson and Park had not detected any signs of enemy counter-surveillance, suggesting that their observation post remained uncompromised. Rodriguez felt her training take over as she prepared for what could be the decisive moment of their deployment. Her breathing became controlled and rhythmic, her heart rate stabilized, and her focus narrowed to the specific task at hand. Years of preparation had led to this moment, and she was determined to prove that her skills hadn't diminished despite recent setbacks. The sound of voices from the compound carried faintly across the valley, suggesting that the meeting had indeed begun. Intelligence reports had indicated that such gatherings typically lasted between 30 and 60 minutes, providing a window of opportunity for the sniper team to identify and engage their target. The challenge would be distinguishing the primary target from other meeting participants. The late afternoon light was ideal for precision shooting, with the sun positioned behind the sniper team to avoid glare while providing clear illumination of the target area. Shadows from the compound's walls created contrast that would help identify individuals when they emerged from the buildings. Weather conditions remained stable with no indication of the sudden changes that had disrupted previous missions. Rodriguez's scope was focused on the main building's primary entrance, where intelligence suggested the target was most likely to appear. Secondary positions were also covered by team members, ensuring that no potential opportunity would be missed. The coordination between observers and shooter was perfect, with each team member understanding their role in the engagement sequence. The weight of their previous failures pressed heavily on Rodriguez's mind as she waited for the target to appear. Each missed opportunity had eroded confidence not only within the team, but throughout the broader military chain of command. Success on this mission would begin to restore their reputation and validate the investment in their training and equipment. The sixth hour brought subtle changes in the compound's activity pattern as the meeting apparently entered a new phase. Vehicle engines were started and allowed to idle, suggesting preparation for departure. Guards adjusted their positions to provide better coverage of potential egress routes. The body language of visible individuals suggested heightened alertness and urgency. Rodriguez felt her finger move to the trigger guard as the anticipation of engagement increased. Her breathing remained controlled, but her pulse quickened slightly as she prepared for what could be the shot that ended their streak of failures. The technical aspects of the engagement were clear in her mind: range, wind compensation, target lead, and follow-through procedures. The team's backup plans were well rehearsed in case the primary engagement failed or complications arose. Alternate firing positions had been identified and routes to them plotted. Communication procedures for calling in artillery support or requesting extraction were clearly understood. Every contingency had been considered and prepared for. As the compound's main door opened and figures began to emerge into the courtyard, Rodriguez felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that preceded every engagement. This was the moment that would determine whether their deployment would be remembered as a failure or a success. The crosshairs in her scope moved smoothly as she tracked the emerging figures, searching for the face that matched their target's photograph. The professional pride that had driven Rodriguez throughout her military career demanded success on this mission. She had overcome numerous obstacles to reach her current position, proving herself in a field dominated by male colleagues and earning respect through consistent performance. The recent failures had challenged her sense of professional identity and competence. Stevens's voice came through her earpiece with updates on the emerging situation, his tone reflecting the same mixture of anticipation and determination that she felt. The team was functioning as a cohesive unit despite the pressure they faced, drawing on their shared training and experience to maximize their chances of success. As more figures emerged from the building, Rodriguez began the careful process of target identification that would determine the success or failure of their mission. The face in her scope would need to match exactly with the photograph they had studied repeatedly during their briefing. There could be no mistakes in target selection, as the consequences of engaging the wrong individual would be severe both legally and operationally. The moment of truth was approaching rapidly as the meeting participants gathered in the courtyard. Rodriguez felt her training and experience converge into the sharp focus that characterized elite marksmanship. Years of preparation had led to this instant, and she was ready to prove that the Marine Corps' faith in her abilities had not been misplaced. The figure stepping into the courtyard matched the intelligence photograph with startling clarity. Rodriguez felt her breath catch as she confirmed the target's identity through her scope. The Taliban commander stood confidently in the open space, apparently unaware that he was being observed by one of the Marine Corps' most skilled marksmen. This was the moment they had been waiting for throughout months of frustration and failure. Stevens whispered the range confirmation. 847 meters, wind from the northwest at approximately 8 kilometers per hour. His voice carried a subtle urgency that reflected their shared understanding of how crucial this opportunity was. After weeks of missed chances and equipment failures, everything had aligned perfectly for what could be their most important engagement of the deployment. Rodriguez made minute adjustments to her scope's windage and elevation settings, compensating for the environmental factors that Stevens had identified. The mathematical calculations that had once been second nature now carried extra significance, as any error could result in another devastating failure. She could feel the eyes of her teammates upon her, sharing the weight of expectation that surrounded this shot. The target remained stationary for nearly 30 seconds, providing an ideal shooting opportunity that would have been impossible to miss under normal circumstances. Rodriguez controlled her breathing and began the trigger squeeze that she had performed successfully hundreds of times during training and previous deployments. Her finger applied steady rearward pressure as she prepared to fire the shot that would end their streak of failures. The rifle's firing pin fell on an empty chamber with a hollow click that seemed to echo across the valley. Rodriguez felt a moment of disbelief as she realized that her weapon had misfired at the worst possible moment. She immediately began malfunction clearance procedures, working the bolt to eject the faulty cartridge and chamber a fresh round. The target remained exposed in the courtyard, apparently engaged in conversation with other meeting participants. Stevens maintained his observation while Rodriguez completed her immediate action drill. Target still exposed, no indication they've detected our position, he reported in a tense whisper. The relief in his voice was obvious as Rodriguez successfully chambered a new cartridge and resumed her shooting position. The entire malfunction clearance had taken less than 15 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Rodriguez reacquired her sight picture and prepared for her second attempt. The target had moved slightly but remained within easy range of her weapon. Her confidence was shaken by the misfire, but her training told her to focus on the immediate task rather than dwelling on what had gone wrong. She began her breathing cycle again, preparing to take the shot that could restore their reputation. The second cartridge also misfired, producing the same hollow click that had preceded her first failure. Rodriguez felt a surge of panic as she realized that something was seriously wrong with either her ammunition or her rifle. She began another malfunction clearance cycle while Stevens provided updates on the target's continued exposure. The window of opportunity was rapidly closing as other meeting participants began moving toward their vehicles. Thompson's voice crackled through their radio headsets. "Rodriguez, what's your status? We've got movement indicating possible departure preparation." His question carried an undertone of desperation as he recognized the critical nature of their situation. The team had invested 6 hours in this mission, and their chance for success was slipping away with each passing second. Rodriguez completed her second malfunction clearance and chambered a third cartridge, this time from a different ammunition lot to eliminate the possibility of bad rounds. Her hands remained steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system, a testament to countless hours of training under stress. The target had begun moving toward one of the waiting vehicles, but remained within her engagement envelope. The third cartridge fired successfully, but the bullet struck a mud wall 3 feet to the left of the target. Rodriguez felt the familiar recoil of her rifle and heard the distinctive crack of the supersonic projectile, but the result was another devastating miss. The target immediately dove for cover behind one of the vehicles while armed guards began scanning the ridgeline for the source of the gunfire. Stevens tracked the bullet's impact through his spotting scope and called out the correction. Left 3 feet, no elevation change needed. His professional composure remained intact despite the obvious frustration in his voice. The team had come closer to success than in previous missions, but the result was still a failure that would have serious consequences for their future operations. The compound erupted into activity as the Taliban security team responded to the sniper fire. Vehicles' engines roared to life, armed guards took defensive positions, and radio traffic increased dramatically as commanders attempted to coordinate their response. Within minutes, the entire convoy had departed the area, taking their primary target with them and ending any chance for a follow-up shot. Rodriguez felt the weight of another failure settling upon her shoulders as she watched the vehicles disappear into the mountain passes. The technical aspects of the miss were puzzling, as her scope settings and shooting fundamentals had been correct. The bullet's trajectory suggested a scope 0 shift, but her rifle had been confirmed accurate just days earlier during routine maintenance. The team began their withdrawal from the observation post immediately after the engagement, following pre-planned routes that would minimize their exposure to possible pursuit. Taliban forces in the area were known for their quick reaction capabilities, and remaining in position after revealing their location would be tactically unsound. The extraction proceeded smoothly, but the mood was somber as they made their way back to base. The debriefing session that followed was more intense than those conducted after previous failed missions. Colonel Mitchell attended personally, along with the intelligence officer and the unit's senior non-commissioned officer. Every aspect of the operation was analyzed in detail, from the initial infiltration to the final engagement sequence. The pattern of equipment failures was becoming impossible to ignore. The investigation into Rodriguez's rifle malfunction revealed several disturbing facts. The firing pin showed signs of excessive wear that should have been detected during routine maintenance inspections. 2 of the cartridges that had misfired contained powder charges that were below specification, despite coming from supposedly reliable ammunition lots. The scope 0 had indeed shifted, though no explanation could be found for why this had occurred. Wright raised the possibility of sabotage during the debriefing, suggesting that someone with access to their equipment might be deliberately causing the failures. The idea seemed far-fetched, but the pattern of technical problems was difficult to explain through normal mechanical wear or manufacturing defects. Security procedures for the weapons storage area were reviewed and found to be adequate, but questions remained about who had access to their equipment. The psychological impact of the near miss was more severe than their previous outright failures. Coming so close to success before experiencing multiple equipment failures created a sense of helplessness that was difficult to overcome. Rodriguez found herself questioning not only her equipment, but also her own abilities as a marksman and soldier. The base's armorer, Sergeant Major Robert Collins, conducted an exhaustive examination of all the team's weapons and equipment. His investigation revealed minor problems with several rifles that could have contributed to accuracy issues, but nothing that fully explained the pattern of failures. Collins had 25 years of experience with Marine Corps weapons systems and admitted that he had never seen such a combination of problems in a single unit. Intelligence reports following the mission confirmed that the team had indeed identified and engaged the correct target. Radio intercepts indicated that the Taliban commander had been shaken by the close call and was taking additional security precautions for future movements. The fact that they had come so close to success while still failing made the outcome even more frustrating. The team's morale reached its lowest point following the near miss at the compound. Stevens began experiencing sleep difficulties that affected his performance during subsequent training exercises. Thompson started questioning his fundamental shooting techniques, breaking down, and rebuilding skills that he had mastered years earlier. The confidence that was essential for effective sniper operations was being systematically destroyed by their repeated failures. Park suggested that they request new equipment from higher headquarters, arguing that their current weapons and optics might have been compromised in ways that weren't immediately apparent. The idea had merit, but replacing the entire team's equipment would take weeks and might not address the underlying problems they were experiencing. Rodriguez supported the suggestion while simultaneously working to identify other potential solutions. The base's communications intelligence team reported increased Taliban radio traffic discussing American sniper positions and capabilities. Enemy forces seemed to be aware of their operational patterns and were taking countermeasures that made successful engagements more difficult. This intelligence suggested that their problems might extend beyond equipment failures to include operational security breaches. Rodriguez spent hours reviewing video footage of her failed engagement, analyzing every aspect of her shooting technique and equipment handling. The malfunction clearance procedures had been executed correctly, and her shooting position was textbook perfect. The mystery deepened as technical analysis failed to identify clear reasons for the equipment failures that had cost them their best opportunity in weeks. The team's training schedule was modified to include additional equipment maintenance and malfunction clearance drills. Collins supervised these sessions personally, sharing his expertise in weapons troubleshooting and repair procedures. The extra training was valuable, but it couldn't address the psychological damage that repeated failures had inflicted on the team's confidence. Medical personnel at the base began monitoring the team's stress levels and overall health status. The flight surgeon, Captain Jennifer Martinez, conducted individual consultations with each team member to assess their mental state and provide support resources. Her evaluations revealed elevated stress indicators across the unit, but no disqualifying conditions that would require removal from duty. The failed mission also had broader implications for coalition operations in Kos Province. Intelligence assets that had been allocated to support the sniper team's operations were reassigned to other units that were experiencing greater success rates. This resource reallocation reduced the team's access to real-time intelligence and made future missions more challenging to plan and execute. Wright proposed that they modify their operational procedures to include backup shooters and redundant equipment sets. This approach would provide additional options when primary systems failed, but it also required more personnel and resources than were currently available to the unit. The suggestion was noted for future consideration, but couldn't be implemented immediately. The investigation into potential sabotage expanded to include background checks on all personnel with access to the team's equipment and operational information. This process was time-consuming and created additional tension within the base as personnel were subjected to enhanced scrutiny. No evidence of deliberate sabotage was discovered, but the investigation continued as a precautionary measure. Rodriguez found herself wondering whether the recent failures were simply an extended run of bad luck or indicative of deeper problems that couldn't be easily resolved. Her rational mind told her that statistical anomalies were possible and that their skills and equipment would eventually return to normal performance levels. However, the pattern of failures was so consistent that it challenged conventional explanations. The team's relationship with other units at the base became strained as their reputation for effectiveness continued to deteriorate. Personnel who had previously sought their advice on tactical matters began consulting with other specialists instead. The social isolation that resulted from their professional failures created additional stress that affected their ability to function as a cohesive unit. Stevens began keeping a detailed log of all equipment problems and environmental factors that might be contributing to their failures. His systematic approach to data collection was methodical and professional, but it also reflected an obsessive attention to detail that suggested unhealthy stress levels. Rodriguez encouraged his efforts while monitoring his psychological state for signs of serious problems. The base's intelligence officer presented new information suggesting that Taliban forces had developed advanced countersniper techniques based on captured coalition training materials. These techniques allegedly included methods for detecting sniper positions and predicting likely engagement windows. If accurate, this intelligence would explain some of their recent difficulties, but it still didn't account for the equipment failures they had experienced. Collins completed his exhaustive equipment inspection and concluded that while minor problems existed, none were severe enough to explain the pattern of mission failures. His professional assessment was that the team's equipment was within acceptable tolerances for military operations, despite the recent problems. This conclusion was both reassuring and frustrating, as it failed to provide clear explanations for their difficulties. The psychological pressure of their situation was compounded by reports from other Marine units in Afghanistan that were achieving remarkable success rates. These comparisons were inevitable but unhelpful, as they reinforced the team's sense of professional inadequacy without providing actionable solutions. Rodriguez worked to maintain team morale while privately questioning her own leadership abilities. As night fell over forward operating base Chapman, Rodriguez sat alone in the team's equipment bay, cleaning her rifle and preparing for another attempt at mission success. The familiar ritual of weapon maintenance provided some comfort, but it couldn't eliminate the doubts that had begun to creep into her professional mindset. Tomorrow would bring another opportunity to prove themselves, but the weight of recent failures made that prospect seem daunting rather than inspiring. The base's evening briefing included updates on intelligence developments and operational priorities for the following day. Another high-value target had been identified, and preliminary mission planning was already underway. Rodriguez listened to the briefing with mixed emotions, hoping for redemption while fearing another devastating failure that could end her career as a Marine sniper. Dawn broke over forward operating base Chapman with an unusual clarity that seemed to promise better fortune for the embattled sniper team. Rodriguez had spent most of the night reviewing intelligence reports and equipment specifications, searching for any detail that might explain their continued failures. The new mission briefing was scheduled for 0600 hours, and she was determined to approach this operation with renewed focus and systematic preparation. The intelligence package for their next target was more comprehensive than usual, reflecting the command's investment in ensuring their success. The subject was identified as Abdul Hassan Naziri, a Taliban logistics coordinator responsible for smuggling operations along the Afghanistan-Pakistan border. His capture or elimination had been prioritized by regional command due to his role in supplying improvised explosive devices that had killed dozens of coalition personnel. Captain Hayes presented the intelligence briefing with obvious attention to detail that hadn't been present in previous sessions. Naziri was known to visit a specific tea house in the village of Kwar, approximately 8 kilometers from the base, every Thursday morning between 0800 and 1000 hours. The pattern had been confirmed through multiple intelligence sources over several weeks, making it one of the most reliable targeting opportunities they had encountered. The tea house was a single-story building located at the intersection of 2 major roads, providing clear sight lines from multiple observation positions. Reconnaissance photos showed minimal civilian activity during the target's usual visit times, reducing the risk of collateral damage. The building's architecture and surrounding terrain offered few natural obstacles to accurate shooting, creating what should be ideal conditions for a successful engagement. Rodriguez felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension as she studied the mission details. The target location was significantly closer than their previous engagement sites, reducing the number of environmental variables that could affect shot placement. However, the proximity to the base also meant that any failure would be more visible to higher command and could result in immediate reassignment of the team. The equipment preparation phase was more intensive than usual, with Sergeant Major Collins personally inspecting every component of their weapon systems. Each rifle was test-fired at the base's improvised range to confirm zero and function. Ammunition was selected from 3 different lots and individually inspected for defects. Optical equipment was cleaned and calibrated according to the most stringent specifications. Stevens conducted extensive research on environmental conditions expected at the target site, consulting meteorological data and conducting interviews with personnel who had operated in the area. His analysis predicted stable weather conditions with minimal wind and excellent visibility. Temperature and humidity factors were within normal ranges that shouldn't affect ballistic performance. The environmental picture was as favorable as they could reasonably expect. Thompson and Park spent additional time rehearsing communication procedures and backup plans for various contingencies. Their previous missions had been compromised by equipment failures and unexpected developments, making thorough contingency planning essential for success. Multiple extraction routes were identified and rehearsed until the entire team could execute them without conscious thought. Wright focused on studying the target's photograph and behavioral patterns described in intelligence reports. Positive target identification would be crucial to mission success, and any hesitation during the engagement could result in another missed opportunity. She memorized every detail of Naziri's appearance and created mental checklists for confirming his identity under various lighting conditions. The psychological preparation for this mission was different from their previous attempts. Rather than focusing on their recent failures, Rodriguez encouraged the team to remember their past successes and the skills that had earned them their positions as Marine snipers. The confidence-building approach was designed to counter the negative thought patterns that had developed over recent weeks. Colonel Mitchell visited the team during their final equipment checks, providing personal encouragement and emphasizing the importance of their mission to overall operations in the region. His presence demonstrated the command's continued confidence in their abilities despite recent setbacks. The colonel's words were measured and professional, but his underlying message was clear. This mission needed to succeed. The infiltration to their observation position began at 0500 hours, allowing sufficient time to reach the target area and establish their positions before Naziri's expected arrival. The team moved through familiar terrain with practiced efficiency, using established routes that minimized their exposure to enemy observation. Communication discipline was perfect, with team members coordinating through subtle hand signals and predetermined movement patterns. The observation post was located on a low ridge approximately 600 meters from the tea house, providing an elevated position with clear sight lines to the target building. The range was well within the effective capabilities of their weapons, and the angle offered opportunities for clean shots regardless of which entrance Naziri used. Environmental conditions at the position were ideal, with stable temperatures and minimal wind disturbance. Rodriguez settled into her shooting position with more confidence than she had felt in weeks. The rifle felt familiar and comfortable in her hands, and the scope picture was crystal clear. Stevens established his spotting position and began systematic observation of the target area, noting pedestrian traffic patterns and vehicle movements that could affect their engagement window. The village of Quar showed signs of normal morning activity as residents began their daily routines. Children walked to school along the main road, while adults engaged in various commercial activities near the marketplace adjacent to the tea house. The scene was deceptively peaceful, providing no obvious indication that it was about to become the site of a precision military engagement. Intelligence updates received through their radio confirmed that Naziri had departed his compound and was traveling toward the village in a small convoy of 2 vehicles. His estimated arrival time was consistent with established patterns, giving the team approximately 30 minutes to complete their final preparations. The information was relayed through encrypted communications to avoid any possibility of interception by hostile forces. Rodriguez conducted final checks of her equipment while maintaining observation of the tea house entrance. Her rifle scope was set for the exact range to the target building, with windage adjustments based on Stevens's environmental readings. The first cartridge in her magazine was from a batch that had been individually tested for accuracy and consistency. Every technical factor that could affect shot placement had been accounted for and optimized. The approaching convoy was visible through Stevens's spotting scope as it navigated the village's narrow streets. 2 pickup trucks proceeded at a moderate pace, with armed guards visible in both vehicles. The security posture was professional but not excessive, suggesting confidence in the routine nature of the visit. Radio intercepts confirmed that this was indeed Naziri's convoy approaching the target location. Rodriguez felt her heart rate increase slightly as the moment of engagement approached. Her breathing remained controlled and rhythmic, following the techniques she had mastered during sniper school and refined through years of operational experience. The psychological pressure of their recent failures was present but manageable, overshadowed by her determination to prove that her skills remained intact. The convoy stopped directly in front of the tea house, with both vehicles positioned to provide overlapping security coverage. Armed guards dismounted and established a perimeter while remaining in the vehicles prepared to depart quickly if necessary. The professional nature of the security arrangements confirmed that this was indeed a high-value target worthy of their attention. Stevens provided continuous updates as the situation developed. 2 vehicles stopped, for armed guards visible. Target vehicle is the lead pickup truck. His voice was calm and professional despite the tension of the moment. The spotting scope allowed him to observe details that would be crucial for target identification and engagement timing. The tea house door opened, and several individuals emerged into the morning sunlight. Rodriguez tracked each person through her rifle scope, comparing their appearances to Naziri's photograph and waiting for positive identification. The target's distinctive facial features and clothing style were clearly visible in the intelligence materials, but confirming identity under operational conditions required careful observation. The third person to exit the building matched Naziri's description perfectly. Rodriguez felt a surge of adrenaline as she confirmed target identification and began her engagement sequence. The individual stood in the open doorway for several seconds, apparently surveying the street before moving toward his vehicle. The shooting opportunity was ideal, with clear sight lines and minimal risk of collateral damage. Rodriguez began her trigger squeeze with smooth, steady pressure while maintaining perfect sight alignment. Her breathing was controlled, her grip was consistent, and her shooting position was as stable as conditions allowed. The technical aspects of the shot were flawless, and she felt confident that this engagement would finally break their streak of failures. The rifle's firing pin struck the cartridge primer with a solid impact, but instead of the expected report and recoil, there was only silence. Another misfire at the worst possible moment sent waves of disbelief and frustration through Rodriguez's mind. She immediately began malfunction clearance procedures while Stevens provided updates on the target's continued exposure. The malfunction clearance revealed that the primer had been struck but had failed to ignite the powder charge. Rodriguez ejected the faulty cartridge and chambered a fresh round while the target remained visible near his vehicle. The entire process took less than 10 seconds, but the psychological impact of another equipment failure was devastating. The second cartridge fired successfully, producing the familiar crack of supersonic bullet flight that Rodriguez had been expecting moments earlier. However, the bullet's impact was clearly visible in the dirt approximately 2 meters short of the target. The shot had been rushed due to the pressure of the situation, and her elevation calculation had been incorrect. Naziri immediately dove for cover behind his vehicle while his security team began scanning the ridgeline for threats. Stevens called out the impact location and provided correction data. Short 2 meters, no windage correction needed. The information was accurate, but the engagement window was rapidly closing as the target sought protective cover. Rodriguez made the elevation adjustment and reacquired her target, who had moved to a position behind the pickup truck's engine block. Only portions of his body were visible, making a clean shot extremely difficult. She waited for him to expose himself more fully while monitoring the increasing activity of his security team. The opportunity came when Naziri moved from behind the vehicle toward the tea house entrance, apparently attempting to reach the building's protective cover. Rodriguez tracked his movement and fired when he was momentarily exposed in the open doorway. The shot was technically sound, but the bullet struck the door frame inches from the target's head. The near miss created chaos in the target area as Naziri's security team responded with suppressive fire directed toward the sniper team's general location. Bullets struck the rocks around their position, forcing Rodriguez and Stevens to seek better cover while maintaining observation of the target area. The engagement had devolved into a firefight that favored the enemy's superior numbers. Thompson's voice crackled through their radio headsets. "We've got multiple vehicles approaching from the south. Estimate squad-sized element in pursuit." The situation was deteriorating rapidly as Taliban reinforcements responded to the gunfire. The team needed to withdraw immediately to avoid being surrounded and overwhelmed by superior enemy forces. Rodriguez took one final shot as Naziri attempted to reach his vehicle, but the bullet again missed its mark due to the pressure of incoming fire and the need for rapid disengagement. The target successfully reached his convoy and departed the area under heavy security escort. Another mission had ended in failure despite ideal conditions and careful preparation. The team's withdrawal from the observation post was conducted under fire from multiple Taliban positions. Stevens provided covering fire while Rodriguez packed her equipment and prepared to move. The coordination between team members remained excellent despite the stress of combat, demonstrating their professional competence even in the face of tactical failure. The extraction route led through rocky terrain that provided natural cover from pursuing enemy forces. Coalition air assets were called in to provide close air support and discourage Taliban pursuit efforts. The team reached their extraction point without casualties, but the mission was clearly another devastating failure that would have serious consequences. The immediate debriefing focused on the tactical aspects of the engagement and the factors that had contributed to mission failure. Equipment malfunctions had again played a crucial role, with the initial misfire causing critical delays in the engagement sequence. Shot placement errors during the follow-up attempts reflected the psychological pressure that recent failures had created. Rodriguez felt the weight of another failure settling upon her shoulders as she cleaned her equipment and prepared her mission report. The pattern of malfunctions and near misses was becoming impossible to explain through normal operational factors. Something was systematically undermining their effectiveness, but identifying and addressing the root cause seemed beyond their capabilities. The team's morale reached its lowest point following this latest failure. Stevens began questioning whether they should request reassignment to different roles within the Marine Corps. Thompson suggested that their weapons might be cursed or subject to supernatural interference. Even Wright, typically the most optimistic team member, admitted that their situation seemed hopeless. As evening approached over forward operating base Chapman, Rodriguez sat alone in her quarters, reviewing every aspect of their failed mission and searching for explanations that might restore their effectiveness. The technical failures were documented and reported, but their underlying causes remained mysterious. Tomorrow would bring another opportunity for redemption, but the prospect of continued failure seemed more likely than success. The emergency briefing came at 0300 hours, jolting Rodriguez from restless sleep that had been plagued by dreams of misfiring rifles and missed opportunities. Colonel Mitchell's grim expression told her everything she needed to know before he spoke a single word. Intelligence had identified a time-sensitive target that required immediate action, and, despite their recent failures, her team was the only sniper asset available for the mission. The target was a convoy of 3 vehicles carrying Ahmad Shah Massoud, a Taliban commander whose capture had been designated a strategic priority by regional headquarters. Intelligence indicated that Massoud would be traveling through a mountain pass approximately 12 kilometers from the base at dawn, providing a narrow window of opportunity for interdiction. The mission profile was different from their previous assignments, requiring engagement of a moving target under challenging conditions. Captain Hayes delivered the briefing with unusual urgency, emphasizing that this might be their only opportunity to eliminate Massoud for several months. His travel patterns were typically unpredictable, and intelligence assets had expended considerable resources to identify this specific movement. The pressure to succeed was immense, particularly given the team's recent string of failures and questions about their operational effectiveness. The engagement site was a narrow valley where the road made a sharp turn around a rocky outcropping. This natural bottleneck would force the convoy to slow significantly, creating a brief window for accurate shooting. However, the terrain also limited potential sniper positions and escape routes, making the mission inherently risky. The closest suitable observation post was 1,200 meters from the target area, at the extreme range of their weapons' effective capabilities. Rodriguez felt a familiar mixture of determination and anxiety as she prepared her equipment in the pre-dawn darkness. This mission represented perhaps their final opportunity to prove their continued value as a military asset. Failure could result in the team's dissolution and reassignment of its members to other roles within the Marine Corps. Success might restore their reputation and confidence. The equipment preparation was more meticulous than ever before, with every component inspected and tested multiple times. Sergeant Major Collins had worked through the night to ensure that their weapons were in perfect mechanical condition, replacing several components that showed even minor wear. The ammunition selected for the mission came from a single lot that had been extensively tested for consistency and accuracy. Stevens spent additional time studying wind patterns in the target valley, using meteorological data and consultation with local personnel who were familiar with the area. His analysis predicted challenging but manageable conditions, with variable crosswinds that would require constant adjustment throughout the engagement. Temperature variations between their position and the target area would also affect bullet trajectory and required careful calculation. The infiltration began 2 hours before dawn, allowing sufficient time to reach the observation post and establish their positions before the convoy's expected arrival. The team moved through unfamiliar terrain in complete darkness, using night vision equipment to navigate rocky slopes and narrow defile. The approach was more technically demanding than their previous missions, requiring advanced mountaineering skills. Thompson and Park established security positions covering the team's flanks and rear, while Wright monitored radio communications for any indication that their movement had been detected. The coordination between team members was flawless despite the challenging conditions, demonstrating their continued competence as a military unit even in the face of recent setbacks. The observation post was a natural rock formation that provided excellent concealment and clear sight lines to the target area. However, the position was exposed to wind and weather, creating additional challenges for precision shooting. Rodriguez worked to create the most stable shooting position possible given the limitations of the terrain, using her pack and other equipment to provide support. As dawn approached, Stevens began systematic observation of the target valley through his spotting scope. The road was visible along its entire length within their sector, allowing them to track the convoy's approach and prepare for engagement well in advance. Early morning light would be optimal for shooting, providing clear visibility without the heat distortion that plagued afternoon operations. Intelligence updates confirmed that Massoud's convoy had departed its overnight position and was proceeding toward the target valley on schedule. 3 vehicles were traveling in tactical formation with appropriate security measures, suggesting that the occupants were aware of potential threats but confident in their security procedures. Radio intercepts indicated normal communications patterns without any signs of heightened alert status. Rodriguez felt more confident than she had in weeks as she settled into her final shooting position. The rifle felt solid and familiar in her hands, and the scope provided a crystal-clear view of the target area. Environmental conditions were stable, with minimal wind and excellent visibility. Every technical factor that could affect shot placement had been accounted for and optimized. The convoy appeared in Stevens's spotting scope at exactly the predicted time, moving at moderate speed along the winding mountain road. 3 pickup trucks proceeded in tactical formation, with armed guards visible in each vehicle. The lead truck carried additional communications equipment, suggesting command and control functions that made it the most likely location for high-value personnel. Rodriguez tracked the convoy's movement through her rifle scope, waiting for the optimal engagement point where the vehicles would be forced to slow for the sharp turn. The mathematical calculations for engaging a moving target at extended range were complex, requiring precise timing and accurate prediction of the target's speed and direction. Her training had prepared her for this challenge, but the pressure of recent failures added psychological complexity. Stevens provided continuous updates as the convoy approached the engagement zone. Lead vehicle entering the turn, speed approximately 30 kilometers per hour, range 1,180 meters. His voice was calm and professional despite the tension of the moment. The spotting scope allowed him to observe details that would be crucial for target identification and engagement timing. The lead vehicle slowed significantly as it navigated the sharp turn, presenting the first clear engagement opportunity. Rodriguez could see the driver and passenger clearly through her scope, but positive identification of Massoud required observation of the second vehicle where intelligence indicated he was most likely traveling. The target window was brief, requiring quick decision-making and precise execution. The second vehicle entered her field of view as it followed the lead truck around the turn. Rodriguez immediately identified a figure in the passenger seat who matched Massoud's description and photographic intelligence. The individual was clearly visible through the truck's windshield, providing an ideal target for precision engagement. This was the moment she had been waiting for throughout months of frustration and failure. Rodriguez began her engagement sequence with smooth, controlled movements that reflected years of training and operational experience. Her breathing was steady, her grip was consistent, and her sight alignment was perfect. The environmental corrections had been calculated precisely, and her shooting position was as stable as conditions allowed. Everything was aligned for a successful engagement. The trigger broke cleanly under steady rearward pressure, producing the familiar crack of supersonic bullet flight. Rodriguez maintained her follow-through while Stevens observed the bullet's impact through his spotting scope. The shot felt perfect, and she expected to see the devastating effects of accurate marksmanship after weeks of equipment failures and missed opportunities. Stevens's voice carried obvious excitement as he reported the impact. Direct hit on target vehicle, passenger compartment penetration confirmed. The bullet had struck exactly where Rodriguez had aimed, passing through the windshield and into the vehicle's interior. However, instead of stopping, the convoy accelerated rapidly and continued through the valley without any indication of casualties. Rodriguez felt confusion and disbelief as she watched the convoy disappear around another bend in the road. The shot had been technically perfect, striking precisely where she had intended, but the expected results had not materialized. Radio intercepts suggested normal communications patterns without any signs of emergency or casualty reports. Something was fundamentally wrong with their engagement. Stevens continued his observation as long as possible, but the convoy's rapid departure prevented any detailed damage assessment. All 3 vehicles proceeding at high speed, no visible casualties or mechanical problems, he reported with obvious frustration. The engagement had been executed flawlessly from a technical perspective, but the tactical results were completely absent. The team maintained their observation post for another 2 hours, monitoring radio communications for any indication of casualties or mission impact. Taliban radio traffic remained normal, with no reports of attacks or wounded personnel. It appeared that their engagement had failed completely despite perfect technical execution, adding another layer of mystery to their ongoing problems. The withdrawal from the observation post was conducted without enemy contact, but the mood was darker than after their previous failures. At least their earlier missions had suffered from obvious equipment malfunctions or shooting errors that could be analyzed and potentially corrected. This engagement had been executed perfectly, yet had somehow failed to achieve any results. The debriefing session was more intense than any previous mission analysis, with senior leadership struggling to understand how a technically perfect shot could produce no observable effects. Video analysis confirmed that Rodriguez's shooting technique was flawless and that environmental calculations were correct. The bullet had struck exactly where intended, but Massoud appeared to be unharmed. Medical personnel were consulted to determine whether it was possible for an individual to survive a direct hit from a .308 caliber rifle round. Their assessment confirmed that survival was extremely unlikely given the bullet's energy and trajectory. Body armor capable of stopping such a projectile was not commonly available to Taliban personnel, making the lack of casualties even more puzzling. Sergeant Major Collins conducted another exhaustive examination of the team's equipment, focusing particular attention on the ammunition used in the engagement. His analysis revealed that the cartridge components were within specification and that the rifle's mechanical function was normal. No technical explanation could be found for the engagement's failure to produce expected results. Intelligence analysis of post-mission communications intercepts revealed an unexpected development. Taliban radio traffic included references to blessed protection and divine intervention that had apparently saved Massoud from American sniper fire. The enemy seemed to be interpreting the failed engagement in supernatural terms, which was both encouraging and frustrating for the Marine team. Wright suggested that they request permission to conduct a follow-up mission using different weapons and ammunition to eliminate any possibility of equipment-related problems. The proposal had merit, but intelligence indicated that Massoud had altered his travel patterns following the engagement attempt and was no longer following predictable routes. The opportunity for a second attempt might not arise for months. The psychological impact of the failed engagement was more severe than their previous setbacks because it eliminated equipment malfunction as a potential explanation. Rodriguez had performed perfectly, yet the mission had still failed to achieve its objectives. The implications for their future effectiveness were troubling and difficult to address through conventional means. Colonel Mitchell convened a special review board to assess the team's operational status and make recommendations for future employment. The board included senior personnel from intelligence, operations, and medical departments who would evaluate all aspects of their recent performance. The outcome of this review could determine whether the team continued to function as a sniper unit. As the review board deliberated, Rodriguez found herself reflecting on the supernatural explanations that local personnel had begun offering for their failures. While her rational mind rejected such possibilities, the consistent pattern of perfect execution followed by inexplicable failure was challenging her understanding of cause and effect. Perhaps there were factors at work that conventional military analysis couldn't address. The base's chaplain, Commander Robert Sullivan, visited the team during their period of uncertainty to provide spiritual counseling and support. His presence was comforting, and his willingness to discuss the possibility of supernatural interference provided an outlet for frustrations that couldn't be addressed through technical analysis. For the first time in weeks, team members began talking openly about their fears and doubts. Stevens had begun researching historical accounts of similar phenomena reported by military units throughout history. His findings included numerous examples of unexplained weapon malfunctions and missed shots during critical engagements. While not providing definitive explanations, these accounts suggested that their experience was not entirely unique in military history. The intelligence officer presented additional information about local beliefs regarding the area where they were operating. According to Afghan sources, the region was considered sacred by certain tribal groups who believed that warriors killed defending their homeland continued to protect the area from foreign invaders. While officially dismissing such claims, intelligence personnel acknowledged that local beliefs could affect operational effectiveness. Thompson had begun carrying additional ammunition from different manufacturers and production lots, hoping that diversification might overcome whatever factors were causing their failures. His approach was systematic and professional, but it also reflected a level of desperation that hadn't been present earlier in their deployment. The team's confidence was eroding despite their continued technical competence. Park suggested that they might be dealing with advanced enemy countermeasures that hadn't been identified by intelligence analysis. His theory involved electronic warfare systems or other technological solutions that could somehow interfere with their weapons' effectiveness. While speculative, this explanation offered hope that their problems might have conventional solutions. As night fell over forward operating base Chapman, Rodriguez sat in the base's chapel, seeking spiritual guidance for problems that seemed to transcend military solutions. The familiar ritual of prayer provided some comfort, but it couldn't eliminate the doubts that had begun to undermine her confidence as a Marine sniper. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and, hopefully, some answers to the questions that plagued her team. The review board's findings would be announced the following morning, determining whether they would continue to serve as a sniper team or be reassigned to other roles within the Marine Corps. Rodriguez prayed for wisdom and strength to accept whatever decision was made while maintaining her commitment to serve her country with honor and distinction. The outcome remained uncertain, but her dedication to the Corps and her fellow Marines remained unwavering. In a twist that none of them could have predicted, Rodriguez would soon discover that her most successful mission would come not through perfect technical execution, but through an understanding that sometimes the greatest victories emerge from the most devastating failures. The following day would bring revelations that would change her perspective on warfare, spirituality, and the complex relationship between human skill and forces beyond their control.